To start off our tier list, we have Garen once again in our overpowered tier. Riot recently nerfed Sunfire Aegis' damage on minions and monsters, but since the damage on champions was left unchanged, expect Garen still synergizes fantastically with the item, dealing massive amounts of damage by just standing next to enemies. Comboed with the chip damage from his spin to win skill, Judgment, the Demacian is most definitely still incredibly strong. And since Black Cleaver was also buffed a couple of patches ago, Garen's overall itemization options grant him a strong precedence in the meta. With the new second wind rune adjustment, Garen's sustain in lane is also unmatched, allowing him to utilize the extra sustain to take control of the laning phase and just scale into an absolute monster of a tank. And since he is super easy to play, Garen is the perfect overpowered pick for average elos of play. Now the next Baron Lane champion is Wukong in the S tier. He received some additional buffs in patch 2.3A, and though he's not the strongest Baron Lane champion in lane, he is now definitely viable. Something very important for a Baron Laner's success is the ability to sustain through the early phases of the game. If you cannot sustain your lane opponent, you can farm more minions, and therefore acquire the lead necessary to effectively impact the game. Since Wukong's first ability, Crushing Blow, now grants him a pretty sizable health regeneration on hit, comboed with Grasp of the Undying, the Monkey King is finally in a secure position in the Baron lane. I mean, the healing that he gets from the ability also scales with HP, so Sunfire Aegis Rush or Black Cleaver both synergize fantastically with Wukong, granting him survivability through sustain and just sheer volume of HP. And the last Baron lane pick for today is Fiora in the S tier. She's been very consistently overpowered in the high elo, and usually we'd argue that her kit is really hard to master, and therefore isn't that great in the average level of play. But the thing is, she's gotten so broken that the champion practically plays itself. Just lunge forward at the enemy during the laning phase, preferably hitting the vital spot, and doing so will proc Grasp of the Undying, the definite go-to rune for the duelist. Then you just back off and play safe. The amount of damage and healing from this single combo is legit insane, and is practically all that you need to win against your lane opponent. Once their HP is significantly lower than yours, just all in engage and steamroll the rest of the game. So here is all the Baron lane picks. Now let's move on to the notable jungle picks. With so many jungle changes, now is a better time than any to try out Fizz in the jungle. He recently received some buffs to help his jungle camp clear speeds, so it is definitely a strategy that Riot is trying to encourage. In addition, champions that have Smite now gain an additional 4 mana regen per second while in the jungle or river, meaning that Fizz's mana problems will now be minimized. The Fishy Trident wielder's high base damage and very versatile mobility make him a force to be reckoned with, capable of swimming around the map to outmaneuver his enemies. With the skill that grants invulnerability and the capability to completely burst squishy targets, expect to see Fizz jungle a bit more frequently in your games. And our second jungle champion today is Vi. Her overall kit has already been quite strong, with 2 amazing gap closing abilities that offer fantastic crowd control. But with the recent changes to the jungle, the pick will become even stronger. She's always loved farming the jungle since her consistent damage output excels at clearing camps, and with the additional mana to help sustain her clears and much squishier jungle camps to take advantage of, the brawler is sure to enjoy patch 2.3A. Especially for the less experienced junglers, Vi is perfect for almost mindlessly farming the jungle, with an easy enough kit to utilize during key fights that occur during the game. She's honestly just a great champion for both low and high elo. And last but definitely not least, Evelynn is of course still in our OP tier this list. Yep, you heard that right, she's been getting nerfed multiple times in a row, from her base damage reduction, ultimate cooldown increases, and even decimating her execution potential, but she's still a champion that absolutely loves the new jungle changes. Her biggest weakness was her slow scaling into the game, but with weaker jungle camps to clear at a much faster pace, her biggest exploitable weakness just became much smaller. And to top things off, Evelynn loves to spam hate spikes, making her pretty mana hungry. With the additional mana regeneration for all junglers, Evelynn is super happy with the changes in the role. So here's the full jungle tier list. Moving on to the mid lane, Ahri is a solid S tier for average levels of play in patch 2.3A. She received a minor nerf targeting her base armor, therefore making her more susceptible to attack damage. This means that she'll take slightly more damage from autos and be more vulnerable in specific matchups. But since she relies heavily on keeping her distance and bursting the enemy from afar, the nerf barely impacts her. Especially since Ignite's cast range was also buffed, Ahri has more than enough tools in her kit to warrant the S tier pick. And the second champion for the mid lane is Ziggs in the A tier. He's a fairly easy champion with a rather straightforward playstyle. Keep your distance and hit the opponent with your bombs. Each bomb has different advantages, but all of them do fantastic damage, especially in the late game. His cooldowns are relatively low, so just keep spamming until the enemy either dies or is too low to contest objectives. And if the enemy team clumps up, or if you just want to deal massive damage, throw out your ultimate Mega Inferno Bomb. And the last mid lane champion for this list is Akali in the C tier. She's still a great champion, but if you don't know how to maximize her play potential, she underperforms right now. Having been reworked in patch 2.3, her overall laning phase has become more difficult to manage. She's now got less damage on her poking abilities and more energy costs as well. But to compensate, her all-in engage damage has been increased, so she performs exceptionally when players understand exactly when and how to effectively engage and execute the enemies. But since most players lack this, especially in the lower elos, the ninja is definitely not beginner-friendly. So here's the full tier list for mid lane. Now moving on to the Dragon lane, the first AD carry up is Misfortune in our S tier. She's a lane bully who relies on her bouncing bullet mechanic from double up to harass her opponents. If the enemy simply stands away from the minions, they can avoid a bulk of the damage, but this concept doesn't really register in a lot of low elo players, since typically hiding behind minions grants players a sense of security. Therefore, Misfortune excels at abusing the less skilled players. In addition, her ultimate bullet time absolutely shreds through clumped up targets. You literally just press the button and watch as a rain of bullets destroys your enemies. It really is that simple. Next up is Varus in our A tier picks. This pick has been gaining more priority in recent days since his build paths are incredibly versatile and his base stat numbers are just phenomenal. But to absolutely maximize the pick, players need to understand how to combo in auto attacks between each skill shot in order to maximize the passive procs from his second ability, Bladed Quiver. Without the skill and know how to abuse this mechanic, he's only a decent pick, which is why he's actually lower in this tier list compared to the upcoming high elo list. But if players do understand the comboing nuance alongside strength of each build, the pick becomes even stronger. And the last AD carry for this tier list is Vayne at our sad C tier picks. In the hand of a master, she can still see some crazy plays, as her outplay mechanics are super flashy, and if the player understands how to maximize her damage to pick up early kills on the target, she's not terrible, but most players aren't that great with her, and there are just better champions that can perform her exact same role more efficiently. If you want to play a champion that stacks damage over time, just play Kai'Sa. She can do exactly that, but onto many targets at once. And she even has invisibility like Vayne. And if instead you're looking for a single target champion that deals lots of damage with a single auto, just play Draven. His autos literally just do more than Vayne's. But maybe it's Vayne's mobility that appeals to you. Well, in that case, just play Ezreal. He has a dash that doesn't rely on hitting a champion, and he can even go over walls with it. So unless you just really love this champion, chances are you're better off picking up somebody else. So here's our full AD carry tier list for patch 2.3A. And finally, we're on to the support picks, with Leona up first in our S tier picks for this patch. She's a phenomenal champion when it comes to capitalizing on the bad positioning of enemies, especially with the elongated range of her Zenith Blade. If an enchanter support steps up too far, they are in for a bad time. Her overall kit is very simple to use. You just engage with Zenith Blade, follow up with a stun from Shield and Daybreak, and then use your ultimate solo flare if it's available. She's a prime example of a champion that's super easy to learn, but also has an incredibly high skill cap. The key to mastering the pick is knowing exactly where to be in order to ensure that fights go well. Understanding the flow of a team fight is essential to maximizing Leona's insane crowd control abilities. But in the lower levels of play, as long as you don't completely miss Zenith Blade and Solar Flare, or just feed super hard early, you're going to be putting in work for your team. And our second support is one that I'm very excited to talk about because I've been playing this one a lot myself. We got Malphite in the B tiers. The Rock is actually really solid right now as a support, and no pun intended. Just poke down the enemy using your first ability, Seismic Shard, and then make sure that your passive is up while you're doing so, since the shield grants you favorable trades. Unless the enemy chooses to all in after, or prepare their shields in time, Malphite's short trades are incredibly annoying to deal with. And once Malphite learns his ultimate, Unstoppable Force, the true strength and fun of the pick begins. Look for windows of opportunity to engage, and do your best to make every cast of your ult worth. And the last pick for the day is Nami in our A tiers. She's got a lot going on in her kit, and honestly, if you just stand back and throw out some buffs, she's a great enchanter support to help keep your team safe. With a bubble to protect allies, a wave throwout that knocks out multiple targets, and a heal that serves as a damaging ability as well, the Koi Fish is overall just a very solid pick. Especially with Janna recently receiving a sizable nerf, Nami's crowd control and healing are fantastic tools to have as an enchanter. So here's all the supports ranked in our tier list.